Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you can't tell by now, I am American, which means ever since the beginning of November, I have been filled with an immense aching dread. So I thought that this weekend, just to soothe my anxiety and to help me get out of my reading slump from all the anxiety and not being able to focus, I am going to, instead of going on Twitter for 4 hours a day, I'm going to be reading 4 to 5 hours a day. And I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to actually dig into my romance subplot Goodreads bookshelf. I've been saving a bunch of books that I heard have a good romance subplot and that maybe would be good fantasy books as well, since I'm someone who doesn't really like most romantasy books I pick up on because I really like fantasy, but I also still want something with a romance. So let me take a look and let's pick out what we want to read. Okay, I've heard really good things recently, and I don't know why this is recently. This came out in 2020, but good things about Reign and Ruin by J.D. Evans. Apparently this is a really good political fantasy, but it has a really good romantic subplot as well. Anyway, so I think I want to start with Reign and Ruin, but first I am gonna go get a matcha latte because it is 2 p.m. and that seems like a very demure 2 p.m. type of drink. And then I'm gonna come home and I'm not gonna go on Twitter at all. I'm not gonna see those two men's faces for the entire weekend. And if there's anything pertinent in my society collapsing that I need to know about, it'll come to me in a different way. But I'm not going on Twitter anymore. Okay, let's start. I feel good. I feel like this is gonna be a good thing. Okay, it's now nighttime. I fell asleep for 2 hours, so I am behind in my reading. So I'm just gonna give a brief rundown of what this is about. I'm reading Reign and Ruin, so I started with that one because I've just heard really good things about it from people who are big fantasy fans. So far, no romance at all, but we have started to see how two different kingdoms essentially are operating after this rift that occurred when there was this great war. They used to be united under something that's called the Wheel, and essentially under the Wheel there are 6 houses, and each house has a bloodline that has various elemental powers. So for example, the 2nd house has water powers, the 5th house has fire powers, and each one of those has its own temperamental benefits for the magic user, the mage of that element. But this is very political so far. So we start out with Naime, who is the sultana, and her father is alive. The sultan is alive in this kingdom of Tamar. His cognition is in very fast decline, and she's basically trying to keep it a secret from the council. And they're all trying to vie for power in different ways, and she's trying to keep it from them that the sultan is no longer at his peak, basically. Meanwhile, she actually has been scheming to have an alliance with this other kingdom, Tamar. Wait, what was it? I forget. For another kingdom. The 6 houses have been united together, but then the 6th house is a house of destruction magic, and there was this war that broke out, and then the 6th house is now their own separate thing, but they have been not maintaining power very well, and they haven't been able to expand their kingdom. Our main character Naime is taking this opportunity to get power for herself as the sultan, to essentially strike a deal with them where they can reunite. Anyway, so that's sort of the long story short, and we get to see the perspective of Naime in this main kingdom, which is bigger than the 2nd kingdom with the 6 house mages, whatever. And also Mekram, who is the younger brother of the sultan, I guess. Not the sultan, but the prince of the other kingdom. Wow, so it's very political. This is the most political fantasy I've read in a really long time, which is exciting for me because I really like political fantasy. It's super political, so I'm seeing now why this hasn't really taken off in romantasy spaces and is more something that I see fantasy fans recommending as opposed to romantasy fans, even though it's considered a romantasy. I'm really excited for a good romance in a political plot like this. So that is Reign and Ruin. I'm starving, so I'm gonna go eat, and since I napped, I'm probably gonna stay up really late reading. So okay, I finished Reign and Ruin. Reign and Ruin. So I like that the ending kind of was the beginning of what was set out in the first book, and you can clearly tell that the other couples that will we're going to follow are going to like work on this task that Naime has proposed for the world. And so overall, like I really liked this one, and I'm so excited to read about the other characters that were introduced and their love stories. And it's really fun because it looks like depending on what couple you're getting, we're also getting to see like a more immersive view of each mage's elemental magic. So I know like Ice and Ivy is one that people say is like the best in the series, which is like an ice mage and like a life mage, I believe. And so like that whole thing I love. Like there's gonna be lots of dichotomy about how their powers interact, which is what was so interesting about Naime. And also, oh my gosh, what is it? Mehram? They like had kind of like opposite types of powers in some ways. Like she's light and he's dark. I do love stuff like that. Another thing I want to talk about too is like I've been seeing a lot of people talk about like shadow daddies, and I just watched Leonie's video about this, and that's so funny because she was talking about how basically like the shadow daddies are often like the shadow magic is often like a manifestation of their like broodiness or their like harshness, their coldness, their like out of like their untouchableness. And what's interesting about Mehram is that in this is that like he's not broody. Like he kind of is, but it's more comes off in like an almost like snarky teenager way. Like that's almost how it presented to me, at least. But he's like overall like a very empathetic and very caring character. Like he's not broody, and he's quite charismatic, and I thought that was very refreshing for like the shadow daddy character, because he has shadow magic. If you're looking for a romantasy and you find that a lot of your issue with it is that there is this power imbalance, I would really recommend Reign and Ruin, because even though Mehram is like a more powerful mage than Naime is a much more powerful like political figure, and she also is a very powerful mage in of herself, and they're like about the same age. So this cards are stacked very evenly for them. Generally speaking, like overall thoughts, I'm just excited to see how this world unfolds, and I've heard even better things about some of the other books in the series, so I'm really looking forward to starting that. So yeah, Reign and Ruin, if you haven't picked it up, you should do so. What year is it? I don't know how long it's been since I started this vlog. Just for reference, I'm filming this I think 1 or 2 months after I did my Reign and Ruin review. I think I got into an Ember in the Ashes, and I was thinking about putting it in this vlog, and then I got so obsessed with that series I pretty much read the whole entire thing. By the way, I'm wearing my Invisalign, so please ignore if I have a lisp. I really need to get on it. Like it's really bad right now. I really want to get back into this romantasy vlog, so I did not end up like just reading for a week. I have read like 9 books since Reign and Ruin, and they were not romantasy at all. So I have a plan now though. I do want to finish this vlog, and I am starting Swordheart by T. Kingfisher today. I was gonna like set up a plan for which books I want to finish this vlog out with, but I do have a list of like 25 books on my Goodreads, and I think I'm just gonna go with the flow. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know that like if I look different, my hair's been dyed a couple times, I think it's because I really started this vlog 2 months ago, and I'm gonna finish it. So here we go, let's start. Starting with Swordheart by T. Kingfisher. I'm very excited. I really love T. Kingfisher. I think that she writes like really good main female protagonists. They're always like really like layered, and like a lot of times they're not like the most badass or incredible woman ever. They're like feel very human. So I think it'll be fun and silly, and also like touching in the way that T. Kingfisher is. So okay, let's go. Let's start for real this time. I am noticing what's happening with the lighting, by the way. I'm filming this, I'm about to go out on a date, so I'm kind of dressed up. My makeup looks so good today, by the way. Can we get a little commotion for the makeup? So I did finish Swordheart by T. Kingfisher today. I just wanted to kind of wrap up my thoughts on it. I'm thinking like before, I've always given like a midway point review of my books. I think I'm gonna do just like my initial thoughts and then my ending thoughts, because I'm gonna try to do a lot of books in this vlog. I think this is gonna take me like 2 months to film. Anyway, but with Swordheart, I read Paladin's Grace, as I mentioned, and it takes place in the same world, so I kind of knew what to expect, but I was actually had a little bit lower expectations, because Paladin's Grace, the 2 books that I read from that one, were a little bit smutty, or like not like super smutty. Like T. Kingfisher is a great fantasy author, so it was like playful, dark fantasy at the same time. But I guess I was expecting a little bit more like lustiness, and this one was like more like sweet. Like, well, not that the other ones weren't sweet. I did like them. I just have a particular preference for how romance works. And then another thing that surprised me, because I've read a lot of T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher is a very famous fantasy author, so I was expecting more fantasy plot. It sounds like I'm about to say that I didn't like that there wasn't as much fantasy plot, but contrary to what I usually think, which is me wanting a fantasy plot first, this one was romance forward, and I think it worked better that way. The relationship between Sarkis and Hela was really, really sweet, and I also think like Hela as a main character was really refreshing, and this is something I mentioned about T. Kingfisher a lot. She's really good at making very like realistic, funny female characters. Like, she's in her mid-30s. She does this thing where like she's not this strong, badass main character. Like, she doesn't have to rely on that, but she is really good at kind of manipulating people through like how much they underestimate her as a woman. And so I thought that that was a really playful way to move the plot forward with a character who isn't like physically strong. Like, we didn't need to rely on that, and it was like a very witty and clever way to make her powerful in her own ways, like to outsmart these men on the road who are threatening her, thinking that she's just a dumb woman. Just Sarkis also is like this benevolent bodyguard character, and he yearns for her so much. There is a lot of yearning in this book. I think it's great for the yearners, and I just really I really liked him. This isn't like a stereotypical, he is grumpy, but this isn't like a stereotypical like alpha male type main character, though he is like strong and gruff. He's like sweet and gentle and just wants to be like loving and like comforting, and I just really liked both of them together. I thought it was really fun. It was super cute. The fantasy plotline of this is more of like a got an inheritance, and she's trying to run away from this family that wants her money, and so they're like on the road, and they just encounter a series of dangers out on the road. So it wasn't like this grand epic scope plot, and it sort of just like served in the background for this relationship that's being built between Sarkis and Hela. And usually I don't like that. Usually I don't like romance first plots, but in this case I really think it worked, just because the characters were so cute. It was also very funny. It read more like a romantic comedy with like fantasy aspects, and there was smut in it, by the way. There was, but it was like very sweet, and that's something that I really like. If we are gonna do smut, I want it to be done well, or like realistically in a way, and this was like sweet. It was like rewarding to watch that after like that little build up that we had in this book. So it was very sweet, it was very cute. I'm looking for a little bit more grit. Like, I'm such a high stakes reader. I want to read a romantasy now that has more like grit and is maybe more like fantasy plot forward, and maybe like with a couple that's like got more tension. Not that they didn't have tension, there was yearning, but not tension, if that makes sense. Like, they weren't like ever at odds with each other very much. I kind of want like something like that. I'll start vlogging my next book probably tomorrow, but those are my thoughts on that. Anyway, I'm gonna go to my date now. We're gonna be late. Bye. Okay, ignore this. It is the start of my day, so I'm about to do my hair and my makeup, but I did just want to update real quick about the new romantasy book I did pick up, which is Awakens. And I picked this up because my friend really enjoyed it, and I was like, you know what, if she really liked it, I might really like it. So I picked it up, and I meant to film my initial thoughts a little bit earlier than this, but here we are now. I'm a decent ways into the book. I'll do a wrap up at the end of it like always, but my initial thoughts are, okay, when I started this, I thought that it read really young. Like, I thought that I had picked up a YA fantasy book, and like just the premise of it in general is also pretty bare bones, which is like I thought would be okay if it was YA. It's essentially about this girl who is a apprentice in this like massive library for this like kingdom, and then one day there's like these shadowy figures that keep appearing to her, and then she gets whisked away to like the tower, which is where the sorcerers reside. And sorcery here is based on like elemental magic. Like in the Eastern Kingdom, which is where she is, it's fire mages, and there hasn't been air mages for a long time. Like, all right, cool, very Avatar: The Last Airbender. I guess like they have very coveted powers, and there was like this war that like mages got involved in, and so that mages and sorcery are like very stigmatized in this universe. And now there are no more air mages, and there haven't been for a couple hundred years, so very Avatar: The Last Airbender in that way. She's like, no, I just want to work in my library, like I will never like be one of you. And then one day she actually meets one of the princes of this kingdom, and he pushes her off of a balcony because he's trying to prove that she has like sorcery that hasn't been like revealed yet. And I don't know, he just thought he had to push her off a balcony for her to like awaken her magic or whatever. He proves to her that she has magic, but she also like legitimately gets roughed up in this process. Like she actually does like break a bunch of bones, like breaks her ribs, she's like bruised, she's like out for 3 days. Anyway, and it's just like her groaning about her internal struggles about like, I don't know, I don't even want to be associated with sorcery, because for some reason in this world, which we don't know yet why, all we know is in this war, sorcery was involved and it was very destructive, and now people are like really stigmatizing against sorcery. And like that's the extent of the world building. I'm having a really hard time kind of like visualizing this world. Like at some points, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm imagining it like medieval, and then at other points I'm like, oh, that feels a little bit Victorian. Like it's just a little bit confusing to me. Feeling like at the minute, I just don't really get what the point of it is yet. Like I don't really see where the plot is going. It just feels like Vala, our main character, is quite annoying. Okay, so that's like the beginning of the book, but I've read a little bit more, and there's like this massive shift that happens where all of a sudden she's really attracted to the prince, and now she's like falling in love with him, and like there was no discernible reason for why. And so I'm feeling like the fantasy element is pretty underdeveloped of this so far, and the romantic element of this is really underdeveloped so far. Okay, and also he keeps telling her, right, like our main character Aldrich, he keeps telling her, we have a bond because of, I don't remember why, some magic thing that happened in the beginning. We have a bond, which if you know me, I do not like fated mates, so I'm like, oh god, here we go. But he told her that they have a bond, and at that moment something flips at her, and then she starts like kind of being in love with him. And it feels like the way that this could move forward that would gain my attention back is if we find out that we know that air mages are coveted, and she is an air mage. I don't even know if I said that. She is an air mage, basically. And he's trying to train her in her air magic and like prime her to be in this sorcery tower. My thought is it can win me back. I will continue to think this is like really too fast paced for the romance and also really underdeveloped for the fantasy, unless we find out that Aldrich the prince lied about the bond and is also like love bombing her, and the reason why he did a 180 flip from being really mean to her to being really nice to her is because he found out that she has air magic, and he wants to use that and manipulate that for himself for this ambiguous reason that air magic is coveted. That won't save the fantasy aspect from being a little bit underdeveloped in my eyes, but it would make the romantic chemistry better, because then we're adding in this conflict and we find out that like he was being duplicitous the entire time, and there's a betrayal, and then they're back to being kind of like enemies, and then like the tension from there, it like can build upon itself for like books and the following books, because this isn't a series. That to me actually would get my attention back. If that happens, I would be inclined to read the second one. Another thing is like it reads like it's YA, but Vala just turned 18, so I'm like, okay, this could still be YA, but she does talk about like her previous sex life and stuff like that, which I'm not saying you can't have in YA, but it's very clear to me now that this isn't intending to be a YA book, and that it's gonna get spicy at some point. So I'm just kind of like, ooh, it feels weird because it reads so young. I don't know. And also Vala just acts so young also. Like she's 18, but she acts like a 14-year-old. Like she feels very strongly very quickly, and it feels like any little interaction completely flips her opinion of different people. I'm just not really into her. I don't know how to feel so far. Well, I'll probably actually finish that today, and I'll give you my final update on that, but I'm not confident on this, but it could do a 180 on me, so stay tuned. Okay, so I finished Air Awakens. Just to warn you, it's partly cloudy outside, so it's gonna look very ominous at times and also like overexposed at times, just warning you. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I marked this as read in my Goodreads, and then I refused to rate it because, like I said, my friend loves this book down, and I just didn't have the heart to ruin our friendship in the way that I would if I left my honest review on this book. I think it was a chop. I think it was a flop. I can see the appeal of it, right? I get it. Like, it's like elemental magic. There's like a war going on in the background. There's like this romantic relationship where they're denying both of their feelings. See what I mean about the sun? I just felt like it was underdeveloped in pretty much every single way. Like, it wasn't character driven, so there's that, but it also wasn't plot driven either. Like, it felt like most of the book was just dedicated to Vala, our main character, warbling on about this decision that she's like doesn't know if she should make, that like doesn't really matter to us as the audience. Like it doesn't really move things forward very much. And I was thinking that she'd get to that point of making that decision very early on in the book, but instead like most of the pages are just her whining and whining and whining and whining about how like, oh my god, like I don't know what I am anymore, like all of a sudden I have magic. And then also like I thought that I didn't like this prince, but then we kind of hung out off page, by the way. They hang out off page, and now I really have feelings for him and I have to tell him how I feel. But then also I just met the other prince, the blonde one, who's like really friendly and suave and gets all the girls, and he also took a liking to me, and now he wants me to go to the ball with him. And then also there's this other boy who is my childhood friend, who I have for some reason never discussed my parents with until the events of this book, who is in love with me, and he's also really handsome, but I just want the brooding prince who pushed me off of a tower. Like, it was all just her rambling on and on and on. It was like 250 pages, but it felt so long because it was just her talking to herself. And I like character-driven stuff, but this was like, it didn't move anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. The romance between Aldrich the prince and Vala, our main character. Aldrich is like this dark brooding prince who wears black all the time and has his hair slicked back, who is like probably based on like Tom Hiddleston back in 2015. We don't get to see them actually interact very much. Like we know that he starts giving her magic lessons, and then in that time she starts feeling differently about him because he like expresses that he cares about her like choices and things like that. But we don't actually, as the audience, we're not really privy to that. So we are told that from Vala, that she's been seeing him for lessons and everything like that, and then literally like a couple chapters later she is now head over heels in love with him, and all of the angst and all of the slow burn whatever is like are them knowing they have feelings for each other but not admitting it to each other. Like that is the angst. And like for me, I want them to be like unrequited, like don't know how to feel for a long time. Like I want to see them actually develop a relationship where they learn to like each other before I can even care about this romance. It's just like very romance forward, very fast. And then when it comes to like the magic system, it's very underdeveloped. Like we know that she's the first air mage in a really long time. We don't know much about the political structure of this world. It's very clear to me that the empire that she lives in is the aggressor in this world. I don't think that the author was trying to say otherwise, but Vala just like never ever questions that. The only time something happened in this book was when there was a terror attack on the empire, and Vala never thinks to herself like, oh wait, is there a reason why these northerners might attack the empire? Like she seems very uninterested in the politics of, you know, what she's working for and like the prince that she's like so in love with. Like she has no interest in the politics of it all. And another thing that really bothered me about this, again, I don't like Vala. I really don't like this main character because she's whiny and she's self-centered, and we're supposed to be on her side. Like, yeah, it's so crazy that your friends like just rejected you when you told them that you were a sorcerer. Like that's so uncool. Like they're so intolerant. Like Vala, when she found out she was a sorcerer, it took her like weeks of internal struggle to accept that, because she was refused to believe that that could happen to her. So it's like, why does she not have any like empathy? Like I get it, like they need to get over it, but like also it's like you also struggled with that. Like you can't even give your friends 2 hours to get over it, and they both did, and she still was like weird toward them. So Vala was just really weird, and she was very male-centered. Another thing that was an issue was Vala's emotions just flipped on a whim. Like I said, she would be like obsessed with her friends, and then they would say like one thing that was like semi unenthusiastic when they found out that she was like a sorcerer, and then she'd be like, I cannot stand them, like I cannot believe that I let these people into my life, like I have no one on my side except for Prince Aldrich right now. It only served the purpose of the plot because there was no other plot if she didn't feel upset about things at times. Like there would be nothing going on if she wasn't in distress about these reactions from people. But her characterization is so inconsistent and her emotions seem so turbulent, and like she doesn't seem to have a very strong attachment to her friends at this point, and like we're barely given anything about them really. It's like so much of the emphasis was placed on this very half-baked romance that is not slow burn at all, which is fine if you're expecting that, but it's also like I feel like it didn't, like just nothing happened. Like nothing happened in this book, and it was so annoying. Flop, chop, didn't like this one. Okay, while I'm at it, I just want to let you know, I've actually usually been reading 2 books at a time. That's usually how I do it. I usually have like a nighttime book and a daytime book, and Awakens was my daytime book, but I have started my nighttime book, which is also a romantasy apparently, and it's called To Poison a King. So let me just tell you like my initial thoughts on it before I get more into it later today. Poison a King is about this girl named Selena, and she lives in a palace with her mom, who is like a kind of the king's healer. Like her line of women in her family all have like a unique healing ability. Like they brew like herbal remedies. She's always like looked up into her mom, but also seen her as kind of this like terrifying woman in a way because of how easily like she could sway people. And then one day when she's 14 years old, her mom gives her an elixir to give to the new king. So she gives it to the king, and it turns out it was a poison. So now the king is on his deathbed. He's going blind. He's partially paralyzed, and he's kind of like a shell of a man now. And her mom is like, all right, you're gonna be our alibi, you stay here, me and your dad, we're getting out of here. It's really sad because her and her dad actually have like a really strong bond. So Selena is meant to take care of the king, and the queen has designated Selena as the sole caretaker, as in like no servants can even go into his room because she doesn't want rumors to start about the actual condition of the king, since he is in really bad shape. He is a very grudgy person. He is cruel, he is mean. This feels like the fact that her parents left her there is like a very deeply wounding thing that happened to her, and she revisits that feeling quite a bit. And the way that the prose is, like, I really believe that this 14-year-old girl feels so lonely and so empty and so abandoned. The development of her gaining the trust of the king, or like, I'm not really there yet, but just like her observing the king and observing what's going on in his life and why he behaves the way that he does, is really interesting. So far this is a very character-driven story. She just turned 15 and the king is 23. I don't know about that. Like, that age gap is really off-putting to me. I thought that we'd get a time jump like very soon after we were introduced to Celine and be like, oh, years in the future, you know, maybe he's 30 and she's 23, like that'd make more sense. But no, I mean, it would be really weird if there was a romance at this point in the story. But in general, I'm very gripped by just the emotional kind of pull of this story so far, that I don't really care about a romance anymore, just because of the way that this author is doing the character work. I'm very gripped by what's going on inside both these characters' heads at all times, that I don't really care about a romance anymore. But I don't know, I'll see where it goes with the romantasy, because I'm like, ooh, what? A 14-year-old girl? Like, what do you mean? Either way, I am enjoying the story, so I'm seeing where it's gonna go. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts. I'm gonna keep reading and I'll let you know. Okay, this is really long overdue. I finished To Poison a King like literally a week ago. For the first 75% of this, I was like, wait, I'm really tempted to give this 5 stars. And then every time I thought that, I would be immediately hit with the secondary thought, which was like, oh wait, I can't give this 5 stars, and I'm gonna explain to you why. All compliment sandwiches. The slow burn of this was so good in my opinion, and I thought like the way that she would get anxious about missing her mom and feel anxious like in her own body and her insecurity, especially when she was like in her teenage years, was very realistic to me. And I think some people may find this main character whiny, but to me personally, I thought that she was very realistic, and I did like her. And I also like that our main male character, in particular, Elias is his name, the king, he has his own insecurities, and he feels like a lot of times in romantasy, the main male character is this kind of like infallibly hot, perfect, strong, masculine man whose like worst trait is that he's like grumpy. Our main character, Elias, is grumpy, but I think that like a lot of his grouchiness is rooted in like a lot of rejection and fear that like is very valid considering all of the political landscape that he's working within. So I thought that that was interesting, and I think that he felt very layered, and I really liked that, because a lot of times male characters in romantasy books are not very layered, and I did like that about it. I thought like the intimacy of their relationship was not physical for a very long time. In fact, this is not like a spicy book by any means. This is very much about like 2 people who are going through a very traumatic situation bonding to each other, and I think that it's very multifaceted in a lot of ways. Like, I could tell the author kind of restates over and over again that this was a very personal book for them, and I can tell that it was very personal. Now, all of that being said, I could not get my head past the fact that our main character meets the love interest, or Elias, and they're not really in a romantic relationship for most of the book, but they meet when she is 14 and he is 21, and their relationship doesn't develop into a romantic one until she is 18. But like, to me, I don't really care, because that's so weird to me, and it was very frustrating for me, because it was like, it felt gross when I would remember that. I tried to think about if there was like a purpose to this in the book, and I do believe there is a part of this book that is like a theme of this book that is overall about grooming in general, for a couple different reasons. I don't think that that like the main male character was portrayed as a groomer. I think that he was shown in a good light, but I think that there's like cyclical grooming that's been passed down through a couple generations that as a theme of this book, but I just don't think that it's super overt that this age gap actually makes a lot of sense or feels poignant in any way. It just feels a little bit pointless, and it feels uncomfortable at best. So I couldn't, like, in good faith rate it much higher than like 3 stars because of that, because that takes me out so bad. But like, overall, this author is talented, and I liked this story, and I like this type of romance, so I was very bummed about that aspect, because like, I wanted this to be perfect, and I think that it could have been not perfect, but near to perfect for me as someone who likes slow burn and likes character driven stuff. But you just like, I mentally could not leap over that barrier at all. Okay, but then my other criticism of this book was at the 75% mark, it goes from being a character driven book to a plot driven like journey book, which is really weird. They go on like a magical quest type of thing, and close to the end of the book where you're like, how are we gonna do a journey at the end of this? And it is like a months-long journey, and we do like zoom through all of those months, and it is like important that the journey takes place, but it's also like, man, this should have been a duology instead, because this pacing is wild. Like, it was really whiplash, and like, so I liked what happened at the end, but it happened so quickly that I just like wasn't able to like sit in the emotional moments of it, considering how slow and poignant the rest of the like emotional beats of the book were. I was expecting the ending to be like, since that is such a gradual crescendo throughout the book, it just felt like it was like slow, and then bam, you hit a brick wall all of a sudden. Like, that's how it felt. I don't know, I really liked it, but I cannot get over that age gap. Like, I tried to, and I would forget about it in the moment, which is why I ended up enjoying those parts. But then as soon as it came back into my brain, I'd be like, whoa. Like, I think that she just should have been the same age as him, and it wouldn't have made that big of a difference. Sorry, it's like 6 p.m. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick it up or that it shouldn't have been written or anything like that. You can give it a go yourself, but like, just huge caveat warning about those 2 characters and their ages. The next book I'm gonna read is a YA romantasy by Danielle L. Jensen, which I haven't read before, so let's get into that. I'm not even gonna lie, I'm kind of getting burnout. I want to read a lit fic or a speculative fiction. I might have to do a palette cleanser soon, or I'm gonna start hating every single one of them. But I did start a new one, and it is a Danielle L. Jensen book, which I've never read Danielle L. Jensen before. I know she's a very prolific romantasy author. I haven't seen people talk about this one as much as like A Fate Inked in Blood, which just came out. But I picked up Dark Shores by Danielle L. Jensen, and I am doing the audiobook for this. And so I just relatively recently started reading it, and so far it is like a Roman Empire kind of inspired pirate fantasy story, which, okay, you just said so many things that I really love. I love pirate fantasies, and also it's starting to get warmer here, and I mentioned this before, but I love to read pirate fantasies or like very nautical books in the summertime, so it's really scratching that itch for me right now. And it is about this girl, and she is like a pirate, and her mom is kind of like the captain, and they sail the seas, and like there's these different gods that basically like roam the ocean. It's kind of like Leviathan style gods. I don't know all the details on that yet, but I do love that they have like Leviathan gods in this book. And essentially there's this other character, and his name is Marcus. So it's dual POV, and Marcus is a legionnaire for the 47th, I think it's 37th Army of this like empire. And again, it's like Roman Empire inspired, so it takes place kind of like in that time period. They're like a notorious legion. They like never back down from a fight, and Marcus, I think, is like the commander of it, or whatever the word is, the head legionnaire. He essentially is kind of backed into this deal with one of the politicians of the empire to like rope the Marins, who are like the sea, kind of the sea folk, the pirates, into basically like giving up the location of this place called called the Dark Shores, essentially. So it is like an enemies to lovers romantasy that's very nautical and very pirate between Marcus and my main character, whose name I can't remember right now, because he essentially is kind of like keeping her hostage, or like she has to join him and his legion on like guiding them through this like these treacherous seas in order to like give up the secrets of her people. But it's very clear that Marcus also has like competing allegiances, like he isn't sure that he wants to do like the politician's bidding. So I'm looking forward to it. What's interesting about it is I guess I know Danielle L. Jensen. I didn't expect Danielle L. Jensen to be like such a political fantasy author. Like I know that she had done like Bridge Kingdom, but it is very much leaning that direction. And also I'll say I actually really like I do like the writing style quite a bit. It's nothing kind of like crazy purpley or crazy flowery or anything like that, but it's pretty straightforward, and she's also very descriptive about the world that they're in, and it's kind of giving like very Mediterranean as well, which I really appreciate that aspect of things. Like it feels very sunny and bright. My brain goes like Minoan Empire, which like those Minoan Empire girls ate down. Okay, side note, I love the Minoan Empire. If my outfit for every day was just my boobs out and I only needed to worry about my bottoms, every single day I would have a good outfit, because, well, I won't elaborate, but just know I would be eating every single day. And I do really like our main character. I really do like her. She's very like ferocious, but she's also like playful, and she seems to have like a good heart, but she's also like kind of stubborn, and I think that's like perfect for like a pirate. Looking forward to the romance aspect of things picking up, since right now it's mostly been like setting the scene, but I like the scene, so I'll be back with updates soon. Okay, I'm actually like weeks out from reading this because I needed a break, and so I started picking up non-romantasy books. But I did finish Dark Shores by Danielle L. Jensen. This was my first Danielle L. Jensen, and I wish it was a different one because I was ultimately disappointed by Dark Shores, and I'm really upset about that because the premise of this was really interesting and the aesthetic of this was really interesting. It was like a Roman Empire inspired fantasy book that also centers like pirates who basically have gods that are kind of like Leviathan. They go to like a tropical island, and then there's some nonsense plot there, and then so we have the pirates with these legionnaires on this tropical island, and like aesthetically in my head it looked really cool, and the premise and the world building seemed like it was gonna get really interesting, and so I was very confident when I first started this book because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I'm curious about the religion and the belief system around these gods that the kind of like the sea dwellers have, and also there's this big kind of concept around like colonization, because the Empire has essentially colonized all of the East, I believe it is, and now like our main character Tariana is trying to really keep the secret about the West because she doesn't want them to come over and colonize the West. And so like I thought like we would hit more of those points, or maybe I'm just expecting it. I think this is a YA actually. Then I think I was expecting a little bit more in that regard than I actually got, because the politics of this could be really interesting if we dived into that more, and granted they could in other books, but I was just really underwhelmed by the world building in this and ultimately like the plot of it. The politics for me personally started getting a little bit murky, like the politics of the book itself, like not even the politics within world, but the politics of the book itself start getting murky, because there's this big background of colonization. So I was thinking that we were going to have a bit more of a critique on it, but instead Tariana ends up working with the legionnaires and Marcus to take out this tyrant that has kind of been brutalizing the clans that exist on this island that has not yet been colonized by the Empire. And so like they do have like these internal struggles that are going on outside of the Empire, being like a looming threat of like wanting to take over. And Tariana does actually end up assisting the Empire in like convincing these people that they're there to help them, when really they're there to functionally colonize them. And we do get like glimpses of Tariana feeling torn about this, being like, oh, I'm helping them trade one tyrant for another. So like I think Danielle L. Jensen was trying to acknowledge that like this is not a good thing, but just like outside of that, in the writing itself, it's like all of her motivations, all of the plot, everything is just with this end goal of helping the Empire to defeat this tyrant so that these people, this uncolonized land and the people who live in it will trust the Empire more. And so like she has like glimpses of it in her narration of being like, oh, I don't know, but that's like functionally it. And at the end of the day, even after finding out that Marcus is the one who put this other guy into power that basically made this order, he actually like assisted with getting him into power. Even after finding that out, it doesn't take very long for Tariana to just be like, oh yeah, whatever, like that's okay, I forgive you. Like she was mad for a second and it wasn't long enough. I just felt like, considering how grave the circumstances are, and also as Danielle Jensen being a white woman writing about a black woman and particularly making a note about how the West have darker skin and how this is about colonization, I was just expecting a little bit more care. Yeah, it's a YA, you don't need to get super, super complex with it or anything like that, but even then I just felt like the politics of it were like, ooh, wait, that, I don't know. I thought that we could have gone further with that, or like we could have made a stronger stance there than we did. It was a rule, I realized, because the world building functionally just takes place in Tariana's like narration. Functionally, Tariana is just telling us like what's going on in the world, what the political alliances are, you know, where the empire has colonized thus far, what the belief systems are. She just tells us that in the narration. And I just felt like that was very uninspired and it was very boring to me. So I just wish that there was more cleverness in the way that things were unveiled. I also was not impressed by the romance in this. The romance was very like, I was promised an enemies to lovers romance. And they're like, yeah, I see it, because Tariana is begrudgingly essentially held captive by Marcus and the Legionnaires in order to like do this mission with them. And so I'm like, yeah, that is like a precarious situation. Like, ooh, this could be a good enemies to lover setup. It's not. Marcus is taken by her from the moment that he meets her. He thinks that she is I mean, she is like gorgeous, but like he has a soft spot for her pretty much off the bat. He is reluctant to hurt her pretty much off the bat. He defends her pretty much off the bat. There is like not really any personal beef between them, besides when Tariana finds out that he is the reason why this mission is even going forward in the first place, because he put this big bad man into power back at the empire. And even then they don't really work through that in a way that feels like very earned. Like I feel like he got his forgiveness like relatively easily. And I felt like the enemies to lovers was so ham-fisted. They keep saying in their own heads, oh, I can't think of him that way, he's my enemy, or like, oh, I shouldn't do that, she's my enemy. Like they say that, but like actually in the narrative there's nothing really that makes them enemies. Like I want there to be personal beef on top of that interesting political conflict. Marcus was a likable guy, despite everything I just said about him. Like Marcus is like a likable main character. Like he's a very nice person, and I do think it's interesting that he is multi-layered in the sense that he is a good person but also actively working for this regime. And I wish that we got like more into the grit of that, because I think that that is interesting and that is very gray. But it was just more like brushed aside and we're just supposed to like accept Marcus as likable. It was very like, the vibes were very like, yeah, my boyfriend voted for Trump but he's just fiscally conservative, not socially, don't worry. Like kind of that in my head, I was like, that's very Tariana talking about Marcus basically. I don't know, I was not that impressed by it. It was not my favorite story. I won't be continuing with it unfortunately, but a lot of people really liked it. I just felt like it was so plot forward and the romance was so insta-love and very fast that I just like, I didn't really care about anything that happened in this book or these characters. Yeah, I was just not a fan of this. I'm hoping Dagger and the Flame is going to be more interesting. I've heard good reviews of it, especially with the romantic subplot. So at this point, I'm getting really burnt out by the YA romantasy you keep picking up, but I do really want to read this for this vlog. So here's hoping things get better for me. So far, my big winner here is still Reign and Ruin. So I don't know, we'll see. Okay, I'm back from work and I have my next book to tell you about. I keep trying to read consecutive romantasy books. My brain like cannot handle reading two of the same genre in a row, or like this, like I just get burned out really easily by reading all one genre. So, but I'm at a point now where I've read like 20% of this book, so let's talk about it. I started Dagger and Flame, or The Dagger and the Flame. So it is about this girl named Seraphine and she lives with her mother, and her mother is involved in this thing called like the shade trade. So she makes shade, which is like a poison but also a little bit of a drug that can make you like control shadows, and it is very useful in this shady society that is kind of like London, Victorian, like late Victorian or early 1900s, maybe industrial era London equivalent, like adjacent. It a little bit reminds me of Ketterdam from Six of Crows kind of feeling, or Marleybone from Wizard 101. One day her mom is killed and their house is burnt down, and so she flees and she runs, and all she knows is that there's this kind of safe haven that she needs to get to. She feels like she's being followed, and she has a good idea of who did this to her mom, and it is the leader of the Daggers. And the Daggers are essentially this like formal organization that has express permission for some reason from the monarchy to kill whoever they want. So they're like assassins basically, and they use shade to hide in the shadows. But the caveat is shade also poisons your body as much as you take it. So a lot of the assassins who use shade regularly are also like slowly poisoning themselves. It's very, I like that aspect of things. And the safe haven that she has ran off to is actually the cloaks. They're kind of like the cloaks and the daggers are like, it's like a nemesis situation. Like they don't go over into each other's parts of town. Like they have to keep their targets separate, like their marks have to be separate. Cloaks are not assassins, they only steal, they do not kill. The daggers will kill. There is this boy and his name is something, wait, what was it? What is it? It's like something ridiculously on the nose. Flame or something. No, that's the name of the book. What is it called? His name is Ransom. He is one of the daggers. He is given a mission to kill Seraphine. Okay, so that's the setup of this, but he doesn't want to kill Seraphine, and that's like part of my problem with this book. Okay, this book started out so strong for me because I really liked the kind of industrial era, Victorian adjacent fantasy setting that we had. I thought it was really interesting. I loved the shade thing. I love that it's kind of like considered up there with like drugs and alcohol as in terms of like this vice, this substance that people like abuse. I thought that was really interesting, that like the magic is also like a substance abuse issue. And I will say I had a really hard time outside of the setting getting into this world because I just could not take the concept of there being an underground organization for stealing things and for assassinating people that like the government just knows about and is like totally chill with and like has a-okayed it, but like also it's still supposed to be this underground thing. It's like, but it's literally approved by like the king. Like I don't really, it's just really hard for me to suspend my disbelief for that setup. Like it just feels a little corny to me, and that's been my issue every time I read this book. But everyone said this had like amazing yearning and crazy tension and like it's enemies to lovers. I don't know how it evolves obviously, so I'm gonna like try it out, but so far, it's my impression that Ransom does not want to actually have to kill Seraphine, and for some reason feels protective of her right off the bat, which I'm sure we're gonna learn more about. But it's like, that's not tension. They're not enemies. Fake enemies to lovers. Fake enemies to lovers alerts. I am so disappointed when I see things like that. Like, where's the personal beef? I don't know, and I don't mean to come down so hard on it because it has really high reviews, so I'm sure like it gets better as things pick up, but like I'm just not in the mood to read this kind of story, unfortunately. And we're gonna see how it goes. I'm just being honest. Like it might not even be the book's fault. I think it's just my personal fault, so we'll see. There was an explicit over the pants scene in this YA book. Everyone kept talking about how steamy this romance was, and so like I didn't know how that was going to translate to YA, and I was like, is YA doing like explicit handsy stuff now? It was a little bit off-putting for me, honestly. There was a couple problems I did have with this book, but I will say compared to a lot of other books I've read for this vlog so far, I did enjoy it, and I thought it was like, it successfully did I think what it set out to do. I just personally would have made different choices in particular places. And I really did appreciate the fact that this author made the decision to make shade like a substance abuse issue, and the theme of substance abuse, especially for like parental figures and the trauma of that, was kind of explored through shade. And I actually thought that was really creative, and keeping in mind that this is YA, I think that's a interesting way to elevate a YA novel with more mature topics, so I give it major props for that. I will say outside of the shade, the world building, I thought maybe at some point it'd get explained a little bit more. It does not, and that was the main critique I see other people making, is why does the monarchy not care that like they have underground organizations killing people, or underground organizations that run heists all the time? Like, and like I will say, like for Seraphine, our main character, she becomes a cloak when she escapes the man who burned down her house and killed her mother. I was like, hoping that we'd see more cloaking. Like, there's not a lot of cloaking that goes on in this book. It's almost like we just put Seraphine with the cloak so that she could be at odds in the world building with Ransom, so that they're on opposing sides. For like the main selling point of this book and what you hear people talk about is the enemies to lovers slow burn romance. I'm not mad at the romance in this. Like, it definitely, like, they definitely did hate each other. And it wasn't, I'm not gonna say it's fake enemies to lovers, because they actually really did not like each other for like a good scene in this. And I was actually really stoked when I got into that scene. I was like, oh my gosh, it's heating up. Like, they're all in each other's faces, and you know, dagger to neck, all of that jazz. And it was personal, and I did appreciate that. It's just that this book moves so fast through their entire subplot. Like, pretty much after that initial like 2 or so scenes where they hate each other, they're just wildly attracted to each other. I guess for me, when I say slow burn, I do like to watch a relationship develop very slowly, and I like to see little moments. But for them, it was like they hate each other, but they're wildly attracted to each other. And pretty much whenever you're in Ransom or Seraphine's head and they're thinking about the other person, you're just listening to how hot like the other person thinks that they are. I don't know, I'm just not like such a fan of like insta attraction. Like, I like that to be something that's developed upon, even if they recognize that the other person is attractive. For them to like hate them so much that they like objectively just can't find them attractive until more development goes on. This just like, this romantic subplot just moves so fast, in my opinion. And instead of calling it enemies to lovers, I would say this is definitely more of the cat and mouse trope, and it's 2 people who are attracted to each other, but they're doing cat and mouse. My friend also read this with me at the same time, and she absolutely adored it and loved it and gave it 4.5 stars. So I think it does just depend, like, if you like more tropey, cliche YA romantasies and that's something that you're really looking for right now, then I think this would really hit. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's what I was looking for at the minute, but I do crave that sometimes, and this probably would be a good one for that. And even though the slow burn was not slow, I will say I did like the romantic scenes, the way that they were written when they happened. I just wish they were like more spaced out. Okay, I have an unpopular opinion about like romantic subplots in books. I just feel like romantic subplots work so much more if I don't see the male POV. I don't like reading male POVs. I really don't. I get it that that's an unpopular opinion. I just couldn't care less. I'd rather it be like kind of ambiguous about like what the man, especially if they have a cat and mouse relationship, I would rather me not really know what he's thinking when we're in her point of view, so that when these kind of like romantic connection moments happen, it's a little bit more like jarring and like breath catching. But it's like, yeah, I've been watching him fawn over her for like the past 300 pages, and I've been having to read one scene from her and then the exact same scene for him and just listen to them talk about the exact same thing, but then sprinkled in is how much they're attracted to each other. It just is a little bit really redundant, and I just don't like dual POVs. I know that people love them. I really don't like them. I like one POV or like third person kind of deal. I thought like the handling of Seraphine in particular's arc was kind of interesting, especially toward the end. I did actually think like a lot of the decisions at the end of the book were really interesting and set up the second book really well. Like, I think I would be interested to know what happens in the second book, because things kind of took a really drastic turn. I want to get into spoiler territory for this review, because I feel like I can't give you my full thoughts unless I tell you that like exactly what happened. So spoilers now. All right, so at the end of the book, one thing that really put a bad taste in my mouth, Seraphine figures out that she has this like flame magic, which is essentially like the polar opposite of shade, but it also can be very destructive. It can heal shade. So the over the pants hands action scene actually like healed Ransom's shade poisoning, which was kind of interesting and funny, but also it can be a very destructive force, which we find out in the main climax of the book, when Seraphine actually uses her flame magic to essentially incinerate Ransom's best friend, who is a cloak who took on the responsibility of trying to hunt and kill Seraphine per their leader's orders, because Ransom no longer was able to do it because he was in love with her. And this was actually a really good choice, I thought, because it made the stakes feel very serious. Like, he's really dead, and Seraphine really did kill him in this very brutal way. And like at the end of the book, Ransom like still feels a little bit resentful. Like he still really cared about his best friend, and they weren't on bad terms really. But I did like that we raised the stakes in that way, and I thought that was a really interesting climax. There was a ball dropped in the same breath, because essentially Lark is killed, the leader is killed, and then Ransom is like they give him the position of the new leader, and he's like, okay, I can like run away with Seraphine like we had planned and we can live a life together, or I can protect her by becoming the leader and essentially like letting her go and run and never ever sending people her way as long as they're under my control. And so that's the option that he chooses, which I completely understand. It's just that the reason why I also wish it was single POV is because at the end of the book, as Seraphine was waiting for Ransom to show up, Ransom does show up, and it is very clear that he's drank shade again, because shade affects, like, you get markings all over your skin and your eyes change colors, and she had cured him of that. And shade, by the way, is a metaphor for substance abuse, and so she could see that he took shade again and that he's brought all these other daggers. He's clearly with them again. And I was like, oh, that is really interesting. And I was really gripped by the end of the book, because I thought she was just gonna fully believe like, oh, he's forsaken a relationship, he's turned his back on me, he knows I killed his best friend, we're enemies again, he's going to be hunting me now, and he has good reason to, because I killed someone that he loves and we can like never be together. And I'm like, that is good angst. Like, that would be such a good story. And also it's really interesting because it's like, oh, Ransom chose shade over me, and that's something that if you've ever dealt with someone that has an addiction in their life, that's like a feeling that you might get if one of your loved ones, you're like, they are choosing this substance over their love for me. And I thought like that would be a really interesting way to explore that, especially considering one of the things that Ransom and Seraphine bond about throughout the entire book is the fact that Seraphine's father dealt with substance abuse issues with shade, and same with Ransom's father as well. And so they both kind of were in that dynamic. I just thought it'd be an interesting take on like the way that substance abuse gets passed on through generations, even if the children think that they know better and that they're not going to turn into their parents. It would be interesting to see Ransom turn into his parents and then kind of having to come over that arc. But the author does not make that interesting decision. I feel like the author didn't trust the audience to empathize with Ransom still, or root for their relationship still. It just feels like the author was scared to make that decision because she didn't trust the audience, and I was disappointed by that. What does end up happening is Ransom meets up at the location that Seraphine wanted to meet up with him to run away with him. He shows up, clearly drank shade with all the daggers, clearly made the decision to lead them over her. And he walks up to her and he tells her exactly what he's doing. He's like, I still care about you, like, go run, I'll keep them away from you. If I went with you, they would basically be hunting you down for the rest of your life, and I'm not gonna let that happen. And it's like, oh, come on. If this was single POV, it would have been so much more angsty if it was left in the air. Like, we don't know why Ransom made that decision. Like, we don't know why he showed up like that. We don't know why he truly chose shade over Seraphine. And we would just assume it was because Seraphine killed his best friend. He's resentful. And then you get enemies to lovers back to enemies, which is a trope that people really, really love. And like thematically, it would have been a lot more satisfying given the substance abuse with the parental figures kind of element that was littered throughout this entire book. And it just felt weak and a little cowardly to make that decision, and I think I'd be more excited to pick up book 2 if we left off at that point, but we didn't. Okay, overall though, it is a pretty fun romantasy YA. Like, it doesn't do anything that interesting besides the shade element that I mentioned. I want a quick read, enemies to lovers, cat and mouse, and there you go, there it is. I think it's decent. I gave it like a 3 out of 5. Like, for me, I was lukewarm on it, but I feel positive about it. That was Dagger in the Flame. I don't really want to end on this note of like a lukewarm kind of book. I also really want to make sure I end on an adult fantasy, because that's been what I've been wanting to pick up. So I've decided to pick up my very first Grace Draven novel, and the one I chose is Pheonix Unbound, which is Reagan, who's one of my favorite channels. It's like her favorite romantasy book, and I'm really excited about it. So I think I'm gonna hop in bed and just read that, and hopefully it'll end on a good note, and then I can wrap this vlog up, because I've been making this vlog for like 3 months straight. Okay, thank you. I wanted to give myself an opportunity to end this vlog on a really, really good note, which meant that I needed to actually do my research to pick up an adult romantasy. Not that I have anything against YA romantasy, I just think that I read too many of them in a row and I kind of got burnt out. I heard a lot of people talking about Grace Draven as like one of the classic romantasy authors. I mean, she's just from like the early 2010s, I believe, but like people were mentioning her, and then they were also mentioning even Juliette Marillier and one of my favorites, who is Naomi Novik, kind of in the same level. So I was like, okay, I can like picture that a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit more emotional potentially. So I picked up Pheonix Unbound and I did start it. So I'm like 30% of the way through, so I'm like decently through. But this is about a girl, and she basically has like phoenix powers. So she is able to kind of like control fire. She also is kind of impervious to flame. And in this kingdom, there's a spring ritual where every single village has to provide one of their young girls to the empire for this like one night, and they have to walk there on foot, and they're like super abused in that time. And then once they get there, they are basically like bartered as like prizes for their gladiators from the gladiator ring. The gladiators who win are then given one of these girls for a night, and then after the night, the girls who were the prizes are burned at the stake in the auditorium. So it is extremely brutal, and definitely trigger warning for, you know, sexual abuse and everything like that. But our main character, since she is impervious to flame, she is also able as a witch to disguise herself, which I totally forgot to mention, which is very important. She can disguise herself to other people. So she disguises herself like a new young woman every single year as kind of like a sacrifice to her village, and her whole village is in on it. She goes so that another girl doesn't get taken and actually dies, and she's able to survive that final kind of ritual where they burn these women at the stake, and then she escapes in that time. Of course, she's not able to save all the other women, but as long as she's able to save just one girl from her village every single year, she just keeps going back and back and back. And our other main character is this warrior gladiator who's actually, he is enslaved. All the gladiators are also slaves. He is just an incredible gladiator who basically wins every single round, every single time. He always wins. He has like scraped his way by his entire life in the gladiator ring and just trying to survive. He notices that she has been disguising herself, and she's in fact the same woman from the past 3 years. They have never been like linked up before. He has never chosen her, but he decides to choose her this year and is like, hey, I know that you have been here before. I need your help escaping. Of course, he's enslaved. He's also a kind of like a sex slave for the like empress or the queen, who calls herself capital H. And so he goes through like a lot of horrific traumatic stuff, and they're basically just like these two extremely traumatized, extremely abused people that are like trying to use each other to get out of the situation. But as soon as like she's about to go home, he like swoops her up on horseback and just like grabs her and takes her with him, and she like doesn't know why he's suddenly kidnapping her. So it's kind of like a captive romance, I suppose, but it's a little bit different in captive romances because there is this sense of like power imbalances in a lot of those, and this is like two people who do not have any power whatsoever. They're both very aware of it, and they're both like very, very desperate. So I think in that way it sets itself apart from that like kind of iffy trope. I like how slow burn it feels right now. She thinks that he is essentially going to kill her at the end of this, even though he keeps reassuring that he has no intention of killing her, but she's just concerned about getting back to her village before the next spring rites ritual so that she can save a girl in their village, or else someone else is going to die. So I guess you can call it kind of enemies to lovers. I would call it captive to lovers. They're not like enemies necessarily, but of course there's animosity there because she is his captive basically. It does not feel ham-fisted, and also this book is like low-key kind of sexy. Like I will say, the tender moments that they've had, or like the close proximity and having to share a bed. At one point they have to pretend to be husband and wife. It's kind of hot, so I'm liking it so far. I am really liking it so far. It is proving itself, at least to me, to be a pretty decent read so far and a pretty good romantasy. So anyway, that's my initial check-in. Okay, so let's finally talk about Pheonix Unbound. I'm so thrilled that I ended off on this particular note because I think this is my favorite of all of the ones I've read so far. Reign and Ruin comes very, very close, which was the first book. So it's like we have really good bookends here. I loved the first book I read, and I loved the last book I read. Grace Draven, based off of this one book alone, has already become an author that I'm going to start recommending like a ton for people who are interested in romantasy in concept, but find that the execution is often disappointing, especially with a lot of interference from things like book talk and trends in publishing and everything like that. It almost just feels like it goes back to an era of like 2010s publishing era, which personally for me is something that I'm very nostalgic for, especially when it comes to like romance subplots in books. I will say this is not so much a subplot romance. This is very much like a main storyline. Sometimes that doesn't work the best for me because I get bored very easily, but I just really, really like this couple. I think because I liked both characters individually, like our main male love interest and our main female character, I thought both of them were equally very interesting because they are both wounded by this empire, and especially when it comes to SA. So yeah, huge trigger warning for SA because that is like the main theme of this book. They have a really interesting way of going about trust with each other and also like learning how to communicate with each other on a more intimate level is something that they both really struggle with. And it just feels like very grounded and down to earth, despite the fact that this is kind of like a high fantasy world and like our main character is like a phoenix witch, you know what I mean? She has like fire powers. It feels slow burn because the romance in this feels extremely earned. Like the romance does take place like, you know, over the course of one book. Like it's not a book series slow burn, and they also get together at like 60% or 70%-ish. But like just because of how many months they spent together up until that point, like the pacing of the book, I think made that feel super, super earned. So it's not like I want to overpromise on the slow burn, but I also, as someone who likes slow burn and likes romances that feel earned, and that's why I usually like subplots, I give this my stamp of approval. The stakes are high, like we are trying to kind of like fight against this massive empire, but a lot of the moments are like closer knit and like feel like, again, like this word intimacy, like it feels intimate. Like a lot of the scenes are just like intimate scenes of people like talking to each other around food, and I really like those sorts of books. I especially like fantasy books like that. It feels very much like bottom up rather than top down, if that makes sense. And I really appreciate that, especially when it comes to romantasy, because it makes the pace of the romantic subplot feel more believable, like as opposed to like, oh we have big moment, big moment, big moment. Oh yeah, let's have them hit this one romantic subplot beat, and then we'll do more big moments, more big moments, and then have them hit this one romantic subplot beat. It feels like a lot more gradual because it's like a lot of this book is just them simply spending time together and figuring out how to tolerate one another, and then also kind of like addressing their own insecurities and fears based off of the traumatic circumstances both of them came from. My next priority is to read Grace Draven's Master of Crows series. Master of Crows is about this like vampire lord who is kind of being possessed by this demon called corruption, and I believe is causing him to cause a lot of like mishaps, mayhem, a little bit evil conniving. So the Conclave, I believe, is this like justice, judicial / religious institution, wants to bring him to justice. And one of their ways of doing this is sending in this mortal spy, I think. Anyway, it ends up being that they have to kind of like turn to each other and work together begrudgingly to like fulfill each of their own goals that they have, which is very similar to the way that Pheonix Unbound was. I'm really looking forward to that, but I will say, out of all of the authors I read so far, and I know I've only read one book from each of these authors, this is like Grace Draven's whole entire bag. Like all of Grace Draven's books are this sort of thing, like a smaller, closer knit, more intimate type romantasy book that has like really good character driven plot work and compelling, complex characters is my understanding of Grace Draven. So I would highly recommend Grace Draven moving forward. If you haven't checked out Pheonix Unbound yet, I definitely would. Across the board, I really, really enjoyed this. I think this might be one of my favorite books I've read this year. So that's Pheonix Unbound. Okay, let's just jump to my summarized thoughts on everything that I read over the past year. It's so funny that this started out as a reading vlog that I meant to just do in 1 week when I just didn't go on social media and I read instead. And then I was like, you know what, actually, I can't focus on this. I'm just gonna film every time I read a romantasy book. But here is my thoughts in retrospect about everything. Worst to best ranking. My least favorite book I read was probably Awakens. I was really disappointed by Awakens. Honestly, this book actually irked me. I haven't watched back my footage from my review, but I hope it's as mad as I actually was at this book. In retrospect, this was one of the worst books I've read this year. I really don't understand where the hype is at. I'm so sorry to my friend who loves this book. Maybe it's a me problem. I never ever, when I say that, am judging people for loving a book that I really disliked. I just really, for myself, could not get into this whatsoever. There was like not really anything redeemable about it. It kind of failed in the fantasy aspect, the world building, the characters, the romance. It failed on every single level for me. So, but you know what? some people absolutely eat that one up, so you know, up to you. But I'm gonna say that that was my least favorite. Probably my second worst is Dark Shores. I just felt like nothing about this book. Like, now that it's been like 2 months since I read that, I feel so ambivalent toward everything about that story, towards all of the characters, towards the world building, towards the fantasy. Literally, that left no impression on me whatsoever, and it was such a drag to get through because I just felt nothing the entire time I read it. Shout out to you if you felt something when you read that. It's like one of the first times with the book where it's like, it almost feels like I have zero opinion on it, which is like even worse in a way than me disliking it. Yeah, I'm gonna say Dark Shores would be the second worst. I'd say the next one is probably The Dagger and the Flame. I think this was a really strong start for a book, and it just sort of flopped toward the end for me, and I was kind of disappointed where we went theme-wise. Like, I know that it's a YA romantasy, but I think I was expecting more from that. Like, it kind of felt like it dumbed a lot of stuff down for a YA audience in a way that like Ember in the Ashes, for example, would have never done that. So I was kind of disappointed by that. I also kind of felt like this was insta-love or like insta-lust, to be honest, when I was promised like enemies to lovers, cat and mouse. So that was like also really disappointing because I thought that that romance would save it for me, and it just didn't. In theory, I think both of these characters are fun archetypes. I like that shadow magic actually like meant something in The Dagger of the Flame. Like, the bones are so there. I just think it just kind of didn't meet my personal expectations. Not that it's a bad book and I would recommend it to other people. I just think it disappointed me more than I was hoping for. I actually like really kind of didn't go into this unbiased. I thought that I was like gonna like it, and so that's why it was, I think, hitting harder that I didn't that much. Next is To Poison a King, and this is a weird one because I feel like based off of how big that age gap is and how weird that is, by default or like on principle, I should rank it lower, but just trying to evaluate it like as a book, I really truly did really enjoy so many aspects of this book. I don't know why. I guess, like I said, I like close-knit, more intimate stories, and this also takes place over the course of like multiple years. So for a standalone, it just felt like very earned for a romance story, but also just like for our character building and the character work, I just felt was like pretty alluring and interesting, and it felt like very quiet. I think I mentioned that in my review, like that book feels very quiet and contemplative, and I really like books like that, especially fantasy books. It felt more historical in a way, like it felt more like a historical fiction kind of book, and I do think like that's a direction that I really like when it comes to romantasy, because it allows us this kind of like serenity and peacefulness and interiority to focus on the relationship between two characters, if that makes sense. That age gap? What are we doing? To this day, I still don't understand what the point of that was. Like, it's one of the few books where, and I've joked about it before, but I really don't actually age up characters in my head, but that's one of the few books that I really was like, I actually can't get through this if I just pretend that age gap doesn't exist. Like, I have to do this for myself. But I can kind of see that that was meant to be some sort of point made about grooming. Like, there's a lot of really interesting themes in that book, and I don't think that this author would put something like that in there like haphazardly. Everything else was a little bit more clear to me except that, and if you're gonna make an age gap like that and try, because there's a point to be made there, I think it needed to be a little clearer. I cannot overlook that age gap on principle because it makes me uncomfortable. So that would be the next one, I think. I think Reign and Ruin is maybe my second favorite. To be honest, these are neck and neck. Like, it's a little bit arbitrary to say one is better than the other because I think I like them about the same. I loved Reign and Ruin. I'll be recommending this for especially fantasy fans. For Pheonix Unbound, I recommend that for the romance fan, and for Reign and Ruin, I recommend that for the fantasy fans. So it's like romantasy for different types of readers. Reign and Ruin is a wonderful fantasy book first. Like, the first 150 pages of this are straight up fantasy world building. I love the characters in this. I love the magic system in this. It's so elaborate. It's clearly thought all the way through. It just felt very rich in world building that I think that the average romance reader or romantasy reader might find boring, but the average fantasy reader would find really, really intriguing. This isn't the most slow burn book that I've ever read, but again, it's a situation where Because of the way that this author wrote their relationship building, it feels extremely earned, and when you get that burn part of the slow burn, it feels like a wonderful payoff. Like, I loved the way that intimate scenes and spicy scenes were written in this book. It felt like, oh my gosh, we're bringing back intimacy to these intimate encounters. Like, yeah, geez, now that I'm thinking about Reign and Ruin, that was like the first book I read for this vlog. So it's been many months since I read that. You guys gotta read that. That was a really good one. And my number one would probably be Pheonix Unbound. I'm trying not to think that this is recency bias, but I really did like Pheonix Unbound because it had a lot of elements that reminded me just a bunch of the things that I really like about the fantasy that I'm into in particular, which leans a little bit more folkloric fantasy or historical fantasy, which often features like a smaller cast of characters and allows us to sit in more character moments. Yeah, I just really liked it. I like the high fantasy setting. I like that we had high enough stakes. Everything felt heavy. Like this book's stakes felt heavy and believable, and that's something that I find with a lot of romantasy. It also doesn't hit the mark, is the stakes don't feel high enough, or they feel so high, but somehow the characters and the way that they're reacting to things makes everything feel like there's too much levity. There's often a problem like that. That book, I think, just had a balance that was really good. I loved Pheonix Unbound. I'm so excited to start Master of Crows. Excited to read the sequel to Reign and Ruin. So those are next up on my list. But if you have any other recommendations based off of that ranking for me, let me know. So let's just wrap this up finally after a year of filming this video that was supposed to take like 5 days. I want to give my final thoughts on romantasy as a whole. This vlog and reading these books, and I've picked up a couple other ones in the meantime too, has given me a lot of appreciation for romantasy. You won't really see on my channel me making a video that's like romantasy sucks and here's why. If I do, I'm admitting I'm clickbaiting, just so you know. Because I don't think that, and I've defended romantasy in the past before, because in theory this is actually my favorite genre. I do think that romantasy as a genre is a victim of TikTokification of publishing in general, where because it's so trendy and it's such a cash grab genre, there are people who don't respect the tenets of romantasy as much, but want in on this action, and publishers understand that as well. And I know it's all money-making business, but that's why like there is really good indie romantasy going on right now. Like, I would recommend people maybe take a peruse through which indie romantasy books are getting a lot of hype. Also, another recommendation is go back to like 2010 era romantasy, like before TikTok, before publishing was doing this to romantasy as a genre. It's not that genre itself that's objectively bad. To me, that's objectively actually perfect, because I like romance and I like fantasy, so I love it. But it's just, like I said, it's a victim of our modern era. It's a victim of late stage capitalism, the way that so many other facets of our life are. And I think it gets a bad rap for that. And I understand it, and I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of the romantasy, you know, genre on the whole. But I think for me, it mostly just comes down to criticisms about what is happening with book publishing and marketing and everything like that on the whole, as opposed to like romantasy for some reason being the problem. I also have watched a lot of videos that I agree with about how I think a lot of people like to villainize romantasy because it is a woman-led genre, and I don't want to contribute to that at all. I think that we should leave negative reviews and have valid criticisms and have discussions about what does and doesn't work in books so that we can improve this genre, like craft-wise, because we all should be wanting to read good books, whether or not we have differing opinions on if there are taste or not. They should at least be good, you know what I mean? I think there are leveled criticisms you can make about romantasy that has nothing to do with the reader base whatsoever, and I really get uncomfortable with that. So I just want all the romantasy fans to know that, like, I am your ally, you know? I might not be reading the new Sarah J Maas book because I have no interest in it. I might not be reading Zodiac Academy because that's not my bag. But I'm going to continue to pick up a lot of romantasy, but a lot of the really good stuff might just not be coming from the big publishers right now. And you just have to do a little bit more digging and kind of recalibrating your algorithm to get to it. So that's my defensive romantasy as a whole and my thoughts on it at the minute. I had a fun time with this vlog. Sorry it took so long for like 5 books, but I now have a huge TBR, which I did make that video already actually, if you want to look at my romantasy TBR based off of what I learned I liked. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and your patience with this. I bet it's gonna be a long one, but please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!